My old mentor said, "This isn't about you, it's about the industry." I said, "Cool, then the industry can write the next check." He blinked like I slapped him. That was the last thing he ever got for free. I remember standing behind the bar, wiping down spotless countertops that didn't need wiping. The soft opening was starting in 15 minutes and my hands wouldn't stop moving. I kept glancing at the door like a nervous date, expecting a face that never came. My name is Elena. I'm 34 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. 2 months ago, I opened my dream, a small bistro called Ferment. I'd spent years training under Chef Roland Miles, a man the food world worshipped like a prophet. To me, he was more than a mentor, he was a second father. I used to think he saw me as the daughter he never had. But that night proved how wrong I was. I'd sent personal invitations to him and to the entire leadership board at the Willamette Culinary Institute. I didn't just work under Roland, I taught at the institute too, giving unpaid workshops and rewriting their fermentation curriculum on weekends. Everyone said they'd try to make it. "So proud of you," Roland had texted 2 weeks earlier. "You're the future." At 7, the doors opened. People came. Friends. Some press. Old co-workers. But no Roland. No board members. No one from the school. No text. No call. Just silence. By 8, I stopped pretending to check my phone. By 9, I knew. They weren't coming. I told myself maybe something urgent came up. But deep down, I knew it wasn't an emergency. It was indifference. I had served my purpose and now I was just noise, inconvenient noise they didn't have to acknowledge. Then at 9:30 and walked the cherry on top. Tessa. She strutted in wearing a neon green bodycon dress and heels better suited for a nightclub than a bistro. She'd been in my fermentation lab for 2 terms before dropping out to pursue content. Roland still called her a prodigy, though I had edited her final project twice just to keep her from failing. She built her brand on style over skill and apparently that was enough. "Elena, this is cute," she said, looking around like she was appraising a flea market. "Very." Portland. She didn't ask if she'd missed anything or why the place looked half empty. She just plopped herself at the bar, ordered an off-menu cocktail, and started live streaming without asking. Soft launch of Ferment. My old chef's new spot, she told her followers, camera pointed straight at her cleavage. Kinda rustic. Kinda sad. I stood frozen, unsure if I should kick her out or laugh. But instead, I just nodded and walked back into the kitchen. I stared at the steel countertops and felt the heat rise in my throat. All those years. All those unpaid hours. The broken engagements, the holidays spent over stockpots instead of with family. And when it mattered, when it was my turn, the people I'd served didn't even bother to send a reply. I wasn't a protege. I was a stepping stone. A year later, I was flipping basil into a pan when a coworker waved her phone at me. "Have you seen this?" I wiped my hands on my apron and squinted at the screen. There it was, a glossy teaser trailer for Modern Palate, a streaming food series pitched as the collision of culinary tradition and digital charisma. Tessa was the face of it. Her voiceover played over shots of truffle fries and drone shots of vineyards. Executive producer, Roland Miles. I laughed. A dry, quiet little thing that surprised even me. The same man who once said television was the graveyard of real cuisine was now cashing checks off the girl who used to ask me what a roux was. But I shouldn't have been shocked. Tessa had followers. Roland had ego. It was inevitable. 3 days later, I got an email from Roland's assistant asking if I could pop on a call. I said yes, partly out of curiosity, partly because I'm not the kind of person who ignores people, even when they deserve it. "Elena," Roland said, voice chipper like we were old friends. "Hope Ferment's treating you well." "It is," I replied. "Thanks for asking. I've been watching your career. Very proud." He didn't ask why I hadn't invited him to our anniversary dinner, or if he had hurt me by not showing up to the opening. It was like that night never happened. Then came the pitch. "We're building something really special with Modern Palate. But Tessa's green, she could really benefit from your guidance. Would you be open to consulting?" I paused. "Consulting in what capacity?" "Just some light advising," he said breezily. "Talk her through concepts. Maybe help shape a few episodes." "No compensation?" I asked. "Not for now. It's more of a community effort. A chance to pay it forward." I stared at the wall in front of me, trying not to let the heat in my chest reach my voice. "So you'd like me to give free labor to a for-profit show, after being cut off from the launch entirely?" A second of silence. "I thought you'd want to stay connected to the movement," he said. Later that night, I got a DM from Tessa. "It's just advice," she wrote. "What's the big deal?" I didn't respond to her. I sent Roland a short email. "I'm flattered by the offer, but I'll have to decline. Best of luck with the series." The next day, someone tweeted, sad how some chefs can't handle sharing their knowledge with the next generation. It had begun. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was prepping for dinner service. I saw Roland's name flash across the screen and debated letting it ring. But old habits die hard, and I still hadn't learned to ignore ghosts. Elena, he said, skipping pleasantries. We need to talk. I stepped into the alley behind the kitchen, holding the phone with my shoulder as I lit a cigarette I hadn't planned to smoke. I thought you got my email, I said. I did, he replied, voice tighter now. But I think you're being short-sighted. Because I don't want to donate free labor to a show I wasn't even considered for? He sighed like I was a child refusing to share my toys. This isn't about you. This is about the industry. You owe the community, Elena. All that knowledge you've gathered? It belongs to all of us now. I stared at a crack in the pavement and felt something in me shift. Where was the community when I needed investors? I asked quietly. When I was maxing out credit cards to open Ferment, where was the community then? More silence. You're being emotional, he finally said. No, I said, flicking ash onto the ground. I'm being honest. That night, Tessa tweeted, some people think hoarding knowledge makes them valuable. Real ones share the recipe. I knew who it was about. So did everyone else. The quote tweets came fast, vague enough to avoid liability, sharp enough to do damage. She's always been territorial. Maybe if she supported others, she'd be further along by now. One chef I used to consider a friend tweeted, Elena's food is good, but her attitude? Yikes. My inbox started filling up with cancellations. A visiting food writer who'd booked a private dinner weeks ago suddenly had a scheduling conflict. An old culinary school friend DM'd me saying she couldn't afford to get in the middle. Middle of what? I hadn't started a war. I just said no. That weekend, a former student of mine tagged me in a post. Unpopular opinion, the gatekeepers are usually the ones who never got through the rail gate themselves. It felt like death by 1,000 small wounds. No one said my name. They didn't have to. In this industry, silence is the scalpel. You're cut out long before you know you're bleeding. At Ferment, the mood changed. My sous chef started taking calls in the walk-in. One of the servers asked if we were going to modernize the menu to stay relevant. The tone was subtle, the way people talk to someone they've already started backing away from. I wanted to scream. But instead, I went home, sat on my couch, and opened a document on my laptop. Title, The Ledger. It was time to keep receipts. I spent 3 nights pulling everything together. Emails. Calendars. Handwritten notes. A napkin sketch from a late-night brainstorming session that led to Tessa's viral pickled cherry demo, the one she paraded around as her own breakthrough. Every workshop I taught for free. Every private tasting. Every guest lecture at the Institute. I pulled my old tax returns to estimate hours. It was meticulous. It was exhausting. It totaled nearly $75,000 in unpaid labor. That Saturday, I showed up early to the private lounge at Le Conti, a wine bar that Roland liked to use for off-record meetings. I reserved the space myself. Paid for the charcuterie. I even wore my best jacket, the one with the stitched cuffs from a long-gone Paris trip, a gift from Roland back when he still called me his right hand. They arrived together as if choreographed. Roland in a crisp button-down. Tessa in oversized sunglasses like she was dodging paparazzi. She took them off the second she saw me and made a face. Didn't realize this was going to be an ambush. I handed each of them a copy of the file. Spiral bound. Titled plainly, Contribution Summary, Elena Morales. Roland raised an eyebrow. What is this? My invoice, I said, sliding into my chair. For 8 years of labor. He flipped through it, slowly at first, then faster, recognizing dates, emails, even his own handwriting. Tessa didn't look. She scrolled her phone, one perfectly manicured thumb moving in small circles. I'm not asking for the money, I said. I'm just making it plain. Tessa finally looked up. You did it for passion. Nobody forced you. I did it for loyalty, I corrected. Because I thought it would mean something. Roland set the file down and leaned back. Elena, this reads like a lawsuit. It's not, I said calmly. It's a record. Because when people start rewriting history, it helps to have one. He laughed bitterly. You think this proves something? I know it does. You walk away from us now, he said, pointing to the folder, and you'll be forgotten. No one's going to remember a chef with a grudge and a spreadsheet. Tessa chuckled. This is actually kind of sad. You kept track? Seriously? I looked at her. She smiled like she was winning. And that's when it hit me. None of this was meant to be fair. They didn't care about the truth, only the story they could sell. So I stood up. Slowly. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at both of them and said, that's the last time either of you get anything from me for free. Tessa rolled her eyes and went back to her phone. Roland just shook his head. You've changed. No, I said, reaching for my coat. I just stopped apologizing for staying the same. I left the binder on the table. Let them read it. Let them ignore it. That wasn't the point anymore. The point was I saw it all now. Clear as firelight. And I was done pretending I didn't. It started small. A Reddit thread on a food industry sub, buried beneath rave reviews of a new ramen spot downtown. Anyone else here? Chef Morales is impossible to work with? Big ego, zero team spirit. Then came the anonymous Medium post, when mentors become martyrs, the dark side of gatekeeping in the kitchen. It didn't name me, but it didn't have to. The details were specific. The quotes suspiciously familiar. It was written like a hit piece disguised as concern. I knew exactly where it came from. A few days later, a well-known online food mag ran a profile of modern palates' meteoric rise. Halfway through, there was a paragraph that stopped me cold. While some voices from the old guard refused to collaborate, claiming the show exploits labor, others, like Tessa Lane, continued to push the industry forward with grace. Old guard refused to collaborate. I hadn't even turned 35. At Ferment, the tone among the staff shifted again. Nothing direct. Just a new hesitance. A sense that people were waiting to see if I'd self-destruct. The real blow came from somewhere I didn't expect, my new side project. I'd been working with a plant-based meal delivery brand, building out seasonal menus and consulting on sourcing. It was quiet work. Steady. No politics. No drama. Until I got an email from their HR rep. "Hi Elena, hope you're well. We've been contacted by Roland Miles regarding some concerns. Would you be open to a conversation this week?" My stomach dropped. I stared at the screen, pulse hammering in my ears. What concerns? Was he trying to sabotage my job now? I joined the Zoom call 2 days later expecting a trap. HR, the brand's founder, and their head of partnerships were all on the screen. The moment felt clinical. I kept my voice steady. I told them everything. About the unpaid work. The launch night where no one showed up. The fake outreach. The online whispers. I even offered to show them the binder I'd compiled, every hour, every recipe. There was a long silence. Then the founder leaned forward. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," she said. "Thank you for telling us." That was it. No follow-up questions. No raised eyebrows. Just support. Real, honest support. "We've worked with people like him before," the HR rep added. "You're not the first." I almost cried. After the call, I walked into Ferment's kitchen and looked around at the place I'd built. My hands. My vision. My name. They could smear me online. Twist the narrative. Paint me as bitter. But they couldn't erase what I created. And for the first time in months, I realized something important. I didn't need to be loved by them. I just needed to stop needing them. The silence came slowly. At first, I didn't trust it. Every time my phone buzzed, I braced for another article, another anonymous source, another thread twisting my life into something I didn't recognize. But the buzzes stopped. The posts dried up. Even Tessa went quiet. Her last tweet was a photo of a cheese board with the caption, "Self-Care Day." I kept waiting for the next attack. A cease and desist. A lawyer email. A DM from some bootlicking fan of Roland's. But nothing came. And then a strange thing happened. I started breathing differently. It hit me one morning while chopping herbs for the lunch rush. The knife moved clean through the basil, my hand steady. No flinches. No background anxiety turning my muscles into knots. I looked down at the bright green pile and realized no one was watching. No one was judging. I was just cooking. That weekend, I booked a trip to Oaxaca. No agenda. No restaurant meetings. Just me, a backpack, and a few classes in traditional mole making. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to collect something, a credential, a contact, a favor. I was just learning because I wanted to. When I got back, I signed up for therapy. It was long overdue and I knew it. But now I was ready. I was tired of hearing Roland's voice in my head every time I hesitated. "You don't want to be too emotional, Elena. Don't make it personal." Like emotion and passion weren't the same thing. Like my boundaries were baggage. The therapist asked me during our first session, "When did you first tie your identity to pleasing someone else?" And without thinking I said, "The day I was praised more for scrubbing pans than for creating dishes." It was like a crack opened. After that, I took a week off. The restaurant ran without me, not perfectly, but well enough. I drove up the coast. Ate grilled oysters on a beach with no name. Sketched out ideas for a workshop I wanted to lead, not at the institute, but on my own terms. Maybe a community kitchen. Maybe a series for young women of color who didn't want to beg for seats at shrinking tables. I came home lighter. Ferment was still there. Still mine. But something had shifted. The dream wasn't about proving I belonged anymore. It was about finding out what I could become when I stopped auditioning. The quiet, it turned out, wasn't punishment. It was peace. And maybe I had needed to be emptied before I could figure out how to fill myself up again. The pop-up was almost over when I saw him. Roland. Standing at the edge of the crowd, looking out of place in his tailored coat and polished loafers. He didn't belong among the mismatched chairs and open-air string lights. But there he was. I was plating the final course, heirloom tomatoes over grilled sourdough, fermented garlic whipped into the ricotta, when I felt his eyes on me. Not admiring. Not nostalgic. Assessing. I didn't approach him. I figured he'd leave. But when the last guest trickled out and I was wiping down the makeshift prep table, he stepped forward. Elena. I looked up. He hadn't aged, not really. But something about him looked smaller. Maybe it was just the lighting. Didn't see your name on the guest list, I said flatly. He gave a little smile. Didn't think I'd be welcome. You thought right. He shoved his hands in his coat pockets. Tess is not doing well, he said. The show's floundering. Audience dropped. Sponsors pulled. She's overwhelmed. I said nothing. Just waited. He shifted his weight like the words weighed more than he wanted them to. We need help, he said finally. Your voice. Your vision. You could still turn this around. I stared at him, wondering if he could hear how absurd he sounded. Wondering if he even realized he wasn't making an offer, he was asking for a rescue. You don't get to frame this as opportunity, I said. It's desperation. His mouth twitched. The culinary world raised you, Elena. Don't forget where you came from. There it was. The guilt. The myth. The idea that I owed him for the life I'd carved out with my own hands. I stepped out from behind the table and walked toward him. Close enough that I didn't have to raise my voice. No, I said calmly. It drained me. I raised myself. His face fell just slightly, like he hadn't prepared for a version of me that didn't fold. I didn't wait for a response. I walked past him, out into the alley where the summer night felt clean and real. Behind me, he stayed in place, maybe hoping I'd turn around. Maybe realizing I wouldn't. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the urge to prove anything. Not to him. Not to anyone. He could keep his failure. I had something better. Clarity. 6 months after the pop-up, Ferment closed for renovations. Not because it was failing, it was doing fine, but because I was ready to build something else. I didn't announce anything on social media. No glossy rebrands or PR stunts. Just a handwritten sign in the window. Close for now. Building something better. Stay hungry. Behind the scenes, I was pouring everything into a new space on the east side, not a restaurant, but a kitchen. A living, breathing, teaching kitchen. No tuition. No contracts. No unpaid labor hidden behind exposure. I called it the hearth. The idea came to me during one of those slow afternoons at therapy when I was trying to unpack why the betrayal still stuck to my ribs. Why I could build a business but still feel like an outsider in my own industry. You didn't want a mentor, my therapist had said gently. You wanted a guide who wouldn't ask you to shrink. So I decided to become that. I handpicked 3 chefs. Young. Hungry. Raw. All of them had talent. None of them had the resume that opened doors in fine dining, not the right names on their CVs, not the right accents, not the right skin tone. We met every week, cooked together, broke down recipes, costs, sourcing, storytelling. I didn't assign anything. I asked. I listened. One of them, a shy, brilliant baker named Ray, started developing a line of miso sesame muffins that made people rethink breakfast. Another, Layla, reverse-engineered a citrus brine that turned bland tofu into the centerpiece of a sold-out Sunday supper. I never asked for credit. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, I was creating without needing to be seen. Word spread. A local journalist stopped by one day after hearing about our project from her niece, one of the students. She sat through a workshop, ate leftovers with us, asked thoughtful questions. A month later, the piece came out, The Chef Who Chose to Build, Not Compete. No scandal. No drama. Just a story about healing, food, and a woman who had once been erased but refused to stay invisible. My inbox flooded not with pity but with curiosity. Chefs in other cities asking for advice. Parents thanking me. One woman wrote, "My daughter wants to cook again. She read your article and said, maybe the kitchen isn't a scary place." That one made me cry. The hearth kept growing. Slowly. Intentionally. No fast track. No ladder to climb. Just hands in dough, laughter over burnt crusts, and the quiet, radical act of making space without demanding gratitude. I wasn't trying to be anyone's savior. I was just finally becoming the mentor I never had. 1 year later, I walked through the glass doors of the Willamette Culinary Institute for the first time in over 2 years. The lobby still smelled like bleach and burnt coffee. The floors still shined too bright. Students in white coats brushed past me, holding clipboards and nervously balancing sauce trays. None of them looked twice. Good. I wasn't there to be recognized. I was there to speak. An adjunct had reached out months ago. "We're rebuilding the mentorship program," she said. "The old leadership's gone. We'd love to have you share your story." I'd almost said no. But then I remembered how it felt to sit in those chairs, wide-eyed and hungry, thinking that the only way in was to be quiet, obedient, endlessly useful. I said yes. They booked me into the same lecture hall where I once watched Roland demonstrate how to deb one a duck in 3 minutes flat. The same room where he used to make students cry just to prove he could. I stood at the front, hands calm, voice steady. I didn't talk about betrayal. I talked about boundaries. About labor. About how knowledge wasn't sacred because it was rare, it was sacred because of how it was shared. I told them what no one ever told me: you don't have to suffer to matter. After the talk, students lined up to thank me. One young man, barely 20, shook my hand and said, I thought I had to earn my place by letting people walk all over me. But now I know I can just cook. I smiled. Not out of pride. Out of recognition. Before I left, I walked the old hallway, the one with the faculty portraits mounted in sleek black frames. Roland's picture used to hang near the entrance. Gold plaque. Smug smile. I passed it 100 times, trying to believe he saw something in me. Now the spot was empty. Just a faint square on the wall where the frame used to be. I stood there for a long time, not thinking anything grand or profound. Just breathing. Just being. Then a voice behind me said, thanks for showing us what freedom looks like. I turned. A student. Probably just finished her first year. She smiled, then disappeared down the hall. I didn't cry. I didn't swell with triumph. I just stood there and let it land. Not revenge. Not redemption. Just peace. This time, I walked out the front doors not as anyone's apprentice, not as someone desperate to be chosen. I walked out whole.